Let's preview the Seattle Mariners for 2026 up next on Fantasy Baseball Today. Welcome to On the Beat, our mini team preview series here at Fantasy Baseball Today. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Ryan Blake, who writes about the Mariners for lookoutlanding.com. Make sure to give him a follow on Blue Sky at swingsandtakes.com. And let's just start with the Mariners offseason. They re-signed the speedster, Josh Naylor. More on that in a bit. Traded Harry Ford to the Nationals for left-handed reliever Jose Ferrer. They signed Rob Refsnyder to a one-year deal. It hasn't been the most active offseason, but we never put anything past Jerry Dipoto. So, Ryan, what do you think about the team as is? Do you see them making any other big moves before opening day?
Yeah, I think the Mariners are pretty comfortable where they're at the moment. I could see them still signing Eugenio Suarez. He likes Seattle. Seattle likes him. And I think the concerns about his second half performance from last year are maybe a bit overblown. He'd still represent an upgrade at third base over Ben Williamson or Cole Emerson, or at least some useful insurance in case either of them struggles. But ultimately, I think if the season started today, I think the Mariners would be pretty content with their roster going into 2026, right? They're projected right at about 40 F4 as a team, which is exactly where they're projected heading into 2025 and 2024 and 2023 and 2022, right? It's kind of the type of good, not quite great roster the organization kind of intentionally wants to build, right? They see 85 to 90 wins as this sort of sweet spot of just good enough to make them competitive, but in a range that they can kind of be sustainable and perhaps profit maximizing for their ownership groups. And I think they can do that with strong drafts and development and maybe a bit of clever dealing here and there. Just kind of a slightly different version of what maybe the more active versions of Jerry Dipoto's early years in Seattle look like. And to their credit, it's kind of worked, right? They've won 85 to 90 games, just as they've been kind of going for each of the last 5 seasons. They've ended a decades-long playoff drought. They're now the defending AL West champions. They have 2 of the 10 best batters in MLB, one of the deepest rotations in MLB, one of the best back end of the bullpens in MLB. And on top of that, they still have a top 5 farm system that they haven't really traded too much out of. And so a lot of those players are starting to graduate and to help them at the major leagues. And so I guess I think they kind of enter the offseason just feeling somewhat emboldened by this strategy that they've adopted, and seeing last year's ALCS run is kind of proof of concept for what they're going for. That they're already the favorites in the AL West without having to sacrifice much of their farm. I think rather than seeing their position as a sort of ultimatum to push for a World Series in 2026, I think they see it as kind of an opportunity to give some runway to guys like Williamson and Emerson, as I kind of mentioned before, but also Cole Young, Dom Canzone, and a bunch of other players who otherwise might be pushed out of a roster spot if they are pushed out of considerable playing time if they went out and added free agents or certain players via trade. And I think they just see some value in that. Whether or not that's a great strategy for them, it's kind of up in the air. They're only favored in the AL West by a game. They missed the playoffs most of the years that they've been employing this strategy. So it's kind of a we'll see. But I think at the moment, I think they're pretty content with what they have in Seattle.
Let's talk some big fantasy questions for the Mariners, and there were a lot that I could have asked. We try to limit it to 1 or 2 questions here. So, look, I could have asked you about Cal Raleigh and following up on that near MVP season, but let's stick to the things I think fantasy managers would care about most right now. And Josh Naylor, he stole 30 bags last year. 19 of those in just 54 games with the Mariners. I mean, one of the most surprising stats in recent years when you consider Josh Naylor, the player. It was also a contract year. We do see guys, run more in contract years. How much do you think he runs in 2026? Because this is something that fantasy managers are having trouble projecting this year.
Yeah, I think he'll still run quite a bit. It's tricky because I think the word is kind of out, right? Pitchers and teams know he's gonna go into 2026 trying to steal bases, whereas I think he probably benefited a bit from just a surprise factor, with stealing bases last year. But I think he kind of, in some ways, proved, or he wasn't the only one. I think Juan Soto was up there as well. Just kind of proved that under the new rules, that stolen bases are something of a matter of skill more than just pure speed. And I don't think that skill has gone anywhere. So I still assume he'll pick up double-digit stolen bases, maybe something in like around the range of 20 or so. Um, and just as kind of like as a note, the Mariners, they've been a pretty terrible, like one of the worst teams in the league at running the bases last year as far as picking up extra bases, when balls are put in play. But one thing that they really have pushed is, trying to steal bases. It's something that they emphasize. It's kind of in the skill set of players that they're typically going after. I think they see it as something as a way to combat the effect of T-Mobile Park and how difficult it is to string hits together there. And so I assume if Naylor's healthy, he's going to have something resembling a green light and just being able to go as often as he'd like. And if opposing teams are able to shut that down, I guess we'll see in the first few months. But yeah, I totally expect him to steal an impressive amount of bases relative to his sprint speed once again in 2026.
Hey, if we can get 15 to 20 steals from Josh Naylor, that would be just perfect for fantasy this upcoming season. Let's take a quick break, and we'll be back right after this.
When you need your sports news all the time,
we've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you. When you need your sports in a snap, find it on CBS Sports HQ, streaming free anywhere you are.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball. Today we're here previewing the Seattle Mariners with Ryan Blake, and I've got one more big fantasy question for you. George Kirby dealt with a shoulder injury last year, and his arm angle dropped 8 degrees from 2024. That seemed to have affected some of his pitches. I know Chris Towers has brought up like he thinks it affected his splitter, and that's why he didn't throw it so much. So based on anything that you've heard or read, is Kirby fully healthy this offseason and entering 2026? Have you heard or read anything about the arm angle dropping, and do they plan to, get that back, I guess, this season?
Yeah, I haven't heard anything explicit about Kirby's health. I can't really speak, I guess, to whether exactly he's healthy, but what I can say is that once he came back in 2025 and got 3 or 4 starts under his belt, I think like his 4th start, he threw like a complete game or something like that, or struck out some incredible amount of batters. Like once that kind of happened and he kind of got through the I missed spring training phase of his season, a lot of the injury talk kind of faded for Kirby, whereas it didn't really fade for all of the other starting pitchers for the Mariners who spent time on the injured list. So he was solid last year, right around his career norm by FIP. It looked a little bit different. He was striking out batters at a career high, but also walking batters at a career high. He talked a bit in season about starting to get out of the mindset of being, as he said in the past, like being obsessed with throwing strikes and starting to accept more that there's a trade-off and having, not walking batters and still getting batters to like chase and whiff out of the zone. And I think, he was starting to do that a bit more last year. And I think that's why he walked more batters. But nothing that seemed too concerning, I guess, in terms of his overall health going into the future. On his arm angle, I guess it's hard to say what that means, especially when it comes with the Mariners. Like it's an organization of tinkerers. They have the lowest average arm slot in MLB already. So just as a team, we know they prefer the low slot, and maybe it's the type of thing where they just wanted Kirby to go even lower with his arm slot, or like you said, maybe it's something that that's just kind of happened as a either because his arm is still kind of hurt or because it's just kind of where he settled in after being injured. But I don't automatically think it's a symptom with Kirby and with the Mariners. But yeah, I'd still put him in the category of his injury is not at the top of mind, but certainly with any starting pitcher, I think, and any starting pitcher who's been hurt in the last year or so, I think he's kind of in that category of cautious optimism, we'll say.
Yeah, it's kind of chicken or the egg with lowering arm angles. It's like, did they do it on purpose, a conscious change, or did it happen because they're kind of pitching through injury and they might not even know that they're lowering their arm angles? So it's tough to say. But yeah, you're right. After his first 3 starts, it was like a 3.69 ERA, and all his underlying numbers looked pretty much similar to where he has been in years past. Let's get a sleeper here for the Mariners this upcoming season. Ryan, who do you have?
I have Cole Young as my sleeper pick. Former top prospect. Last year was his rookie season. Didn't go all that well. He posted, I think, an 80 WRC plus. He lost his starting spot towards the end of the season as games started to matter more, and the Mariners wanted to kind of move Jorge Polanco back out into the field just towards the end of the season. But the peripherals with Young, I think, were what really impressed me. He posted an 11% walk rate in his rookie year and a sub 20% strikeout rate. Those are kind of what I was expecting with him, just as kind of a control the zone type through the minors. It's still good to see those skills translate to MLB. But what really impressed me with Young is that his max exit velocity last year was 114 miles an hour, which is top 50 in MLB. It's right around where Cal Raleigh hit his hardest baseball of the season. I think it was Kumar Rocker piped him a middle fastball, and he turned on it, hit in the second deck at T-Mobile Park. It was the longest home run hit at the park last season, one of the longest home runs ever hit at T-Mobile Park in the Statcast era. It's just not something that I was really expecting that Cole Young had in him. Maybe it's not something a lot of people, I think, expected that he had in him, but it just opens up a whole new level of projection for him. And rookie year max exit velocity is one of the most important predictors of success in MLB, and he's right up there with some of the truly great raw power potential hitters, just in terms of where he landed. The other thing I would say is, it's not necessarily going to be like some big power hitter, but he did show a very high rate of balls hitting the air to the pull side, which I thought was very impressive. So he has this kind of high floor with not with drawing walks and not striking out. He has this raw power potential with being able to hit the ball 114 miles an hour, and he tends to hit the ball in the air to the pull side, to the shallowest part of the park. And so I think there's going to be a lot more power numbers there than maybe I would have guessed going into last season. I think the biggest concern with Young, though, is actually his defense. It was pretty terrible in 2025. I think he posted like -8 OAA, which was one of the lowest, one of the worst on a rate basis defensive players in MLB last year, which is just really surprising. I think there might have been some reporting about he had an elbow issue and it was just kind of struggling to throw the ball to first base. And so hopefully that's something that gets ironed out, because if it doesn't, he might, if he struggles at the plate, he'll probably be quicker to be taken out of the lineup than if he was playing good defense. But as far as the bat, I actually think the bat projects pretty well at this point.
And what about a breakout for the Mariners in 2026?
Yeah, I'm going with Dom Canzone for my breakout for the Mariners. He came over to Seattle at 2023 at the trade deadline. Pretty bad in his first look. But the Mariners raved about him. They lauded his skills. They kind of gave him a priority spot going into 2024. And then he was pretty bad again in 2024. And I think he dealt with some injuries and just did not hit well throughout the entire season. Kind of came into 2025 as almost an afterthought on the depth chart. He didn't really make it up to the big leagues until June, as players kind of got hurt and things happened in that respect. But from there, sorry, my cat just knocked a bunch of stuff off my table.
That is all good. We usually get frequent visits from Chris Towers' cat as well. So.
But yeah, once he came up, in June, he played like a top 15 hitter through the rest of the final 2/3 of the season. Right, he made some changes to his swing. He made some changes to his stance. He reduced his strikeouts, but he still showed that kind of that ability to impact the baseball. He has this really interesting slasher approach. Pretty much anything near the zone, he's going to swing hard at and hit it on a line to all fields. And so Yeah, I don't think he'll necessarily be a top 15 hitter going forward, but I think he'll continue to be someone who can hit for a high average with modest power and is worth a shot in your fantasy league.
Yeah, I think that's a really great call out from a deep league perspective. The quality of contact was just awesome for Canzone last season. 92.4 average EV, 14.5% barrel rate. So he did damage last season on balls in play. Big thanks to Ryan Blake, who covers the Mariners for LookoutLanding.com. Make sure to give him a follow on Blue Sky at SwingsAndTakes.com. For more extensive fantasy baseball coverage, listen to our full-length podcast, Fantasy Baseball Today, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Thanks for listening to our On the Beat team preview series, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.